Hi, and welcome to The Joy of Ray Tracing. I'm your host, Eric, and in this video series, we'll make several ray tracers from scratch. So before we get started today, I'd like to go over the goals of this series as a whole, and then tell you a little bit about myself. Then we'll go over some requirements that you'll need to follow along with me. And then finally, we'll get to what we're going to accomplish in today's episode. So the goals for this video series are to show how ray tracing works from start to finish. So that means we'll start with blank screens and we'll end up with really cool images. We'll learn how to do this by building several ray tracers from scratch. So we'll start off with the most basic ray tracer possible just to get something up on screen. Then we'll move on to intermediate techniques, which will give better lighting and more quality of images. And then finally, we'll move on to advanced techniques towards the end of this video series. And that's when we'll make it interactive and we'll bring it into real time so that our ray tracers will actually run at 30 to 60 frames per second in the browser on any device, even cell phones. Along the way, we'll learn about the history of ray tracing, and ray tracing itself is about 55 years old by now, so it has a rich and fascinating history. And there were certain key individuals along the way who helped shape it into what it is today. And so we'll look at those individuals and their contributions to the field of ray tracing. And I want to share all of our code that we do here on this video series. So the best way to do that is to create a GitHub repository for just this video series. And so for those of you who might not know what GitHub is, it's a huge website and system for storing and sharing source code for various projects out there. And so we will make a dedicated GitHub repository, and I'll do that on camera here so that you can see how I set that up. And that way, if you want to do your own GitHub repository, then you can do that as well and share your code and demos with anyone online. So now I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. First and foremost, I am not a computer programmer by trade. I'm actually a professional musician and teacher of music. I've been playing piano since I was 6 years old, and in high school, I got into drums and percussion, and I liked it so much by then I ended up majoring in percussion in college. And so I attended Rice University here in Houston, Texas, and I have a master's degree in percussion performance. I'm 49 years old, and my love for computer programming goes almost as far back as music. So when I was 9 years old in elementary school, I got my first taste of computer graphics programming. So we had these Apple II Pluses, I believe. There was only a couple of them for the whole school. So when you got your chance to get on one, it was a really special moment and you looked forward to it. And so they had a program called Logo. It's spelled Logo, and it's sometimes referred to as Turtle Graphics. And so it had a little picture of a turtle on the screen, and so you would give it commands like left, right, up and down and so forth, and it would follow those commands, but it would leave a trail behind it like a line. And so by the end of your list of commands, it will have traced out an image. And so for that moment on, I was hooked on computers. So throughout all these years of computer programming, I've mainly done graphics, but back in the late 1990s, I got into game programming with the C programming language and OpenGL. And by the early 2000s, I released a couple of 3D games using those languages, and I made them free to download. And so as this series progresses, maybe I'll dust those off and show them to you guys. They're on my hard drive somewhere, so I'll have to dig those up and I'll share those with you. My journey into ray tracing started in 2014, and I've been doing it ever since. It's a vast subject, so I'm still learning and trying to improve. But the thing I realized about it is that the more you study it and the more you add to your ray tracers, the more enjoyment you get out of it. And I'm the creator of the three.js path tracing renderer, and it is a path tracer, which is a more sophisticated version of ray tracing, which we'll get into. And it sits upon a 3D library for the web called three.js. And so using the web as the platform allows you to run the ray tracers on any device and on any system or browser. So I put all the code freely available on GitHub. And so we talked about GitHub a moment ago. And so I made a dedicated repository for just this project. And I wanted to share what I've learned and what I've accomplished with others for free. And so you can go, in fact, let's go. If you just do a Google search for path tracing renderer, and there it is. So over here in the corner is my name. That's me. And the cool thing about using the web as the platform is that when you make a demo or a game or a graphics project, that you can easily share it by just creating a link. And all the end user has to do is click on it once and it'll start up immediately. So if you go over to the right side of the page here, there's a clickable link and you just click that. And there we have a path traced image in real time. And you notice up here in the corner, it's running at 60 frames per second. And over here you have resolution. So like if you're on a cell phone, you could dial it down. Or if you're on like a fancier computer, you can dial it up. And I'll just go ahead and try to crank it up to 1. That means there's like 1 ray for each pixel. So it's like really high quality, and it's still running at 60 FPS over here. So now the really cool thing is if you click on the image anywhere, it'll put you into first person camera mode and you can fly around the scene. So you can move your camera, look around. And then fly. You fly up. It's got real reflections from all angles, global illumination from all the light sources. So you can look in the mirror here. I like this view. And it's got realistic refractions from the glass sphere. So you can go inside, take a look around. And then you can go in this glass object here, paraboloid. And then if you go back and scroll down just a little bit, I have dozens of demos that are just one click away. So for instance, let's try the billiard table demo. And let's crank up the resolution because I'm on a fairly nice computer. And it's still running at 60 frames per second. And you can see it almost looks like a photograph. And when we click on it, you can again navigate through the scene with your camera, which is really cool. So let's zoom in and get as close as you want. Fly around, go look at the table. It's got a reflection of the light source right there. And one cool thing about ray tracing is you can add camera effects very easily. And so here is the depth of field effect. So here's that. So you can get like a special camera effect from a real camera. And you can move up the focus or move back the focus. Now I like to go over just a couple of requirements that you'll need to be able to follow along with me as we make our ray tracers. So obviously you'll need some kind of device for entering in the code. So I recommend either a desktop or a laptop, and I recommend that you at least use a laptop size screen just because you want to be able to see the code at a glance and get the whole picture. I had a pipe dream that I would be able to do all this on a cell phone from start to finish, like enter the code in on the cell phone, deploy on the cell phone, and then share. But it works to a certain extent, but I find that it gets a little cramped when you have all the source code on the same little tiny screen. And so I recommend starting with maybe a laptop size screen or up to a bigger desktop screen, just so you can see like the whole picture of what the code is doing at a glance. And it doesn't need to be a fancy computer. So the one I did, the project, the three.js path tracing renderer that I just showed you, I coded that on a laptop from 2015, I believe. So although it's old and it has integrated graphics, it's just a tiny laptop, it does the job. So you don't need to have like the latest or fancy computer. Then you'll need a modern browser installed on your machine, and most people have that nowadays. Anything will do, like Chrome, Safari, and I added Brave to this list. Recently I tried that out and it worked really well. It uses less resources in the background, but any modern browser will be fine. And then we'll need some sort of text editor to edit the code as we go along. So there are a couple of popular options out there like Notepad++ and TextMate for Mac users, but I'm a firm believer in the least amount of friction possible. And so I really love using Microsoft's VSCode, and that stands for Visual Studio Code. And it's a free to download and free to use text editor, but it has a number of great plugins that are made by the community. It has a really strong community behind it. And so you can download, like with one click or 2 clicks, you're good to go. And so it's very fast to set up and easy to use. Now, I'm not going to assume that you have graphics programming knowledge or that you are very experienced in a certain programming language, but it would be really good if you had just a basic familiarity with programming concepts in general. So what is a variable, what is a function, or what is a loop, things like that. If you don't know that kind of stuff at this moment, I highly recommend that you search up an intro to programming on YouTube. And there's like thousands of videos on YouTube about that. And so those will help you to get up to speed and to some basic programming concepts. And that way you can follow along a little better. We will be using JavaScript and GLSL, which is a shading language, but that won't be till later. And as we get to those languages, I will explain from the very beginning how they work and why we're doing what we're doing. So you'll be able to follow along even if you don't have any experience with GLSL or JavaScript and things like that. So what are we doing today? This is a section I like to call today's to-dos. So first we're going to download and install VSCode, and that's the free text editor that we were talking about a moment ago. Then we'll set up some basic options inside of VSCode. So we might change the color theme, or we'll change the format layout of the page, things like that. Then we'll install a really cool plugin called Live Server. And as I was mentioning before, VSCode has an amazing community behind it. And so one community member contributed this plugin for all VSCode users. And so with 1 or 2 clicks, you can install it, and it basically refreshes the browser each time it detects a change in your code. So if you make the tiniest change in your code base, it'll refresh the browser, and so you can see your changes immediately, which is really cool. And then we're going to create the most simple HTML web page ever. We're going to literally make like a 2-word web page, hello world or something like that. And so the reason why we have to have a web page at all is because we're going to place all of our ray tracing code inside a web page shell. And so we just need a basic web page to hold all of our project and our ray tracing code. And so I'll show you how to set that up. And then we'll test that everything is working by making a small change to our code and seeing if the Live Server plugin refreshes it immediately. And so once that's done, we should be good to go. And so let's get started by installing VSCode now. So to get Visual Studio Code installed, we can just do a simple Google search. Type in VSCode download. And it should pop up on the first or second hit. And as mentioned before, this is available for all platforms. So whether you're on Windows, Linux, or Mac, it should be available to you. So I'm on a Windows device, so I'm going to click this. And then open up the file that it downloaded. Hit accept. Next. It's fine where it wants to put it, so next. And it'll create a start menu folder, which is nice. So, and then let's go ahead and create a desktop icon. And make sure these are both checked down here, but they usually are. And then hit next. And I think we're good to go. So hit the install button. And let's not launch it right now, but just hit finish down here. And before we launch Visual Studio Code, you can see the shortcut it added to my desktop here. Let's create a folder for our projects, and that way we can open it up inside VS Code. So just anywhere on the desktop, right click and make a new folder. And we can call it RayTracing Projects. Now go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. And you'll be greeted with their general landing page. And let's click on extensions over here. It's the little Tetris looking blocks. This allows you to access the marketplace, and there's a bunch of cool plugins that you can download for free. And there's a color theme that I really like that's on the marketplace. And so let's do a search for that in this little window here. So it's called Night Owl. And it should come up at the top. So you can see that. And if you click on it, it'll give you a little more info about the plugin. So let's hit install. And I like the version without italics, so I'm going to click on no italics, but you can have italics if you like that sort of thing, but I tend to like all the text the same format. So I'm going to click on Night Owl, no italics. And then my VS Code now is all set to the new color theme. So now let's get one more extension for today, and that's the live server that we were talking about. So let's go back to extensions. Let's click up here in this little window again and erase the Night Owl text, and now do a search for live server. So live server. And it should come up at the top again because it's very popular. You can see the number of downloads each plugin has. And so this one has almost 25 million downloads. So it's very popular, and I got a very high rating. So I absolutely love this. It's absolutely indispensable, I think, if you're going to do anything related to the web. So we can click on this as well. And if you want to get some more info, you can find out more about it. But I'll show you guys how to use this in a little bit. And so we just hit install again. All right. So that's all we need for now for VS Code to be able to run our code. There's one more option I would like to set before we start entering our code. And so go over to the left bottom corner here and look for the gear icon. Click that, and then you'll see a settings, and click on that. So for the purposes of this video series, I want you all to be able to see my code easily, even if you're on a small cell phone and you're watching this video. So I'm going to increase the font size as my first option here. And you'll notice that it says commonly used, and so it automatically populates this list with the most frequently set options that you can do in VS Code, which is handy. So I'm going to change the font size, it should be like default 14, but I'm going to change it to 20 on my machine, just so y'all can see it on the video better when I start typing code. All right. And then under here, it says autosave, and we definitely want to use this. So this will kind of like tie in with our live server. It'll, like when we make a change in the code, it'll autosave it for us as we type, and then that will trigger the live server to refresh the browser, and we won't have to do anything on our part. We'll just watch it change in real time. It's really cool. So let's click on after delay. And again, for readability, I like a bigger tab size, which is the amount of space between an indented line. So the default is usually 4, but I like the indentation to be larger so that I can really tell at a quick glance what is indented and what is not. So I'm going to change this 4 to an 8. And by the way, if your screen doesn't match mine in terms of what they show here on the most commonly used settings, then you can do a search up here in this window, and VSCode has an excellent search engine. Like, say for instance, I wanted to change the font size. You would type font, and then immediately you can see all the options for font that VSCode has. And so right here is font size. It's super easy to find options that you need to set. Now we're ready to start coding. So now you can click X on the settings tab, and let's go to the file explorer, which is this the couple of files icon here. Click on that. And then it says, you have not yet opened a folder. Would you like to open a folder? And so that's why I had you create the folder on your desktop, so we can do this step now. So we're just going to open up that blank folder. So open folder, and then it should be right on our desktop. So I'm going to click on desktop, or over here. And then we see RayTracing projects. Select folder. And then it might show you just a little security thing, but you know, we made this folder ourselves, so we trust ourselves. So you can say, yes, I trust the authors of all the files in this folder. So yes. Okay, and now you'll notice over here on the left side, it has our folder name, RayTracing Projects. And you'll notice this little file icon with a plus, and that creates a new file in this folder. So let's go ahead and click that. And then let's call it like my Webpage. And this is important. The extension must be HTML for the browser to be able to recognize it. So make sure you do .html and then hit enter. And now it created a blank file that we're going to enter our code into, and it has the extension HTML. And the cool thing about Visual Studio Code is it has automatic detection of file types. So if you look down here, it's going to say HTML, and see it says language mode. So it knows that it's a HTML document that's meant for a web use. And we're good to go. So let's start typing now our most simple web page ever. So I'll go into more about what HTML is all about and how you access the different elements in an HTML document. But for now, just know that HTML is a markup language. So it's more symbolic in nature. It doesn't really have like if, then, else, stuff that you would get in a complete programming language. So it's more of like a symbolic language. And so it's all about adding elements to the web page. And everything that you add to an HTML document like this is going to be called an element. And an element is defined by its opening tag and its closing tag. And so I'm going to show you how that looks right now. So just do shift and less than sign. And the cool thing about VSCode is it knows what you're wanting to do, because this is an HTML document and it recognizes that. And so it offers you all the most useful options at this point. So scroll down until you see HTML. And we are going to create an HTML tag. So HTML. Click on that. And now it should have filled that in for you. And now you do the greater than sign on your keyboard. So shift greater than sign. And look at that. It populates the closing tag for you. So notice that the opening tag has HTML surrounded by the left angle bracket and the right angle bracket. Those are called angle brackets, by the way. And then the closing tag is a / and an HTML surrounded by, again, the left angle bracket and the right angle bracket, or the less than sign and the greater than sign. And so now hit enter with your cursor right there. Hit enter on the keyboard. Now what we're going to do is create a head element and a body element. So let's do the tags for the head, and it's the same for all elements in HTML. You do this process over and over again. You're going to get really used to it. So hit the less than, so shift less than sign. Then scroll down until you get to head. All right, click on that, and then close it with a greater than sign, or the right angle bracket. And again, like magic, it fills in the closing tag for you. So now we're going to hit enter, and then it should have indented again on the next line. So you can see how this stuff becomes nested, and that's why I like to have the 8 characters, because it's more visible that way when you just glance at it quickly. Now let's go down, before we put something in there, let's create a body element. So put your cursor right here and then hit enter. And now maybe just put another space there. Hit enter one more time, and then do left angle bracket or less than sign. And then find body in this one, so body. Then close it up, so right angle bracket. And then hit enter. And it should do the same thing that it did with the head. So now we have an HTML element on the outside that contains everything. Then we have a head element and a body element. And those are defined by the tags. So once the browser sees that these little tags are here, it's going to know what to do with that. So now we're going to create a title element. So let's go in here, and you might have to press tab a couple times if it puts your cursor all the way over here. So tab, and then let's create a title element. So we're gonna, now you know how to do this, right? So less than, look for title. There it is. Close it up with the greater than. Okay. And this one, you don't need to press enter yet. Let's just do all on one line. So it's perfectly valid to have everything all on one line like this. And then the larger elements we're going to have on 2 lines like this: head, body, and then the HTML on the very outsides. So let's click inside the little opening and closing tags, and maybe push a space there, give it a little space, and then type my web page. All right. And now go inside the body element, and you might have to hit tab again to get to this spot. So you should be right under the title here. And now this doesn't need an element. We're just going to type some text. So this is the easiest part. So you can put whatever you want here. So I'm going to put "it worked." Okay, and you can add whatever message you want. Okay, this was what will show up in the web page. So now, if you notice that while we were typing, this will have like a little white circle up here when it's changed, and there's no white circle up here anymore, which means it automatically saved for us. So now this is saved under this file right here. And now here comes the magic part, and why I like VSCode so much and this plugin so much. So we're going to go find where it says go live, and that is down on the very bottom right hand side there, go live. And it says click to run live server. So when you do that, it's going to open up your browser, but it'll open up your default browser. So whatever you have as your default browser, it's going to do that. So let's click go live and watch the magic. Here we go. Starting. And look at that. It worked. Congratulations. You all are now web developers. Now, seriously, it's really easy to get HTML documents from scratch going. And so if you notice up here, it says the title, and that's what we put in for the title. Let me go back here real quick. And so we added the title of my web page, and that's what appears up here on the browser tab. And then whatever text we type in the body, so let me go back here, it worked. That's what shows up in the web page. Now, it doesn't have any notion of like stylings or color or anything like that. It doesn't have any functionality. You can't click on it. You can't do anything with it. So it's a very useless web page, but it's really easy to get going with this stuff. And so that's why I like it so much. And we're going to use the bare bone aspects of HTML like this. So we're going to just create like a blank web page pretty much. And then we're going to stick all our fancy ray tracing code inside a canvas element. And so that'll allow us to draw to the screen and draw graphics and things like that. And so it'll always be simple. We're never going to get way into web development or anything like that. We're just using it as a foundation to build upon. So now at this point, the last thing that we had on our to-do list was make a change to the code and see if it'll update now. So this is the other magic part. So you notice it says it worked, right? So now I'm going to say, I'm going to erase this. Well, let's shrink this down so you can see it. Let's see. I'm going to shrink this down too. And I'm going to just move it over here. And then let's make this just a little smaller so I can stick them side by side on my tiny laptop here. Okay, that's good. So now, check this out. So we're gonna erase it worked. And we're gonna say, look at that, it already updated. Now we're gonna say hello world, which is the first program for every beginner. So hello world. You can put an exclamation mark on it like that, and it automatically updates in real time, almost instantaneously. And so this is a really cool thing because I come from a background of C and C++ development back in the late 90s. And whenever I made a small little change like that, I used to have to recompile the whole thing or the whole game, and just to see a small change and realize, oh, I don't like that change, I'm going to go back and do something else. Then you got to go back, make the change, and then hit recompile again and sit there for minutes sometimes and waiting for it to show up. So having something like this where it's almost instantaneous is like a really great thing. And so we're going to use this to our advantage. So now I think we've accomplished what we wanted to today. And so on the next episode, I'm going to go over the HTML document in more detail, as well as add a canvas element to the page. So remember, we talked about elements. So we have the HTML element, we have the head element, body element. Well, there's a thing called a canvas element. And as the name implies, it allows you to draw. So you add a canvas element to your web page, and it's as simple as one of these header body things. And you're good to go. You can start applying draw commands to that canvas element, and then you can see graphics on your web page. And if you make a small change, it'll update in real time too. So that's really cool. All right, so I'm so excited to see you on the next episode, and we're going to get going with the graphics and adding cool stuff to our webpage. And then very soon we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how ray tracing works, and we're going to start coding a ray tracer inside the browser. So until next time, see you then.